In this episode of Simpa Says, Marc Jordan shares his career journey from aspiring paleontologist to the Vice President of Product Management at SGNL.
And so I started, this dream as a 5-year-old of becoming an archaeologist, becoming a paleontologist. A lot's happened since then. Left that dream behind, and in high school decided I wanted to get into forensic science and forensic chemistry.
He discusses his shifts from forensic science to technology, highlighting the role of problem solving, connections, and identity management.
And so the lure of solving computer problems was really interesting to me.
Marc also recounts his move to the United States and his experiences at Microsoft and Google, offering career insights and advice for transitions.
Almost all of the opportunities I've had in recent times because I've chosen to specialize.
So a lot of the experience you'd had essentially put you in the best possible position when that opportunity came up, right? Become part of our community by watching or listening and subscribing or following to Simpa Says. All right, Marc, thanks for joining us on Simpa Says. So one of the first things I want to sort of tell people about is the roles that people have currently got, and then we'll get into my first question. But you're currently the Vice President of Product Management at SGNL, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought it was an acronym, but it's Signal.ai. Yes, that's very good with my memory. I'm not going to start there. The first question I'm asking everybody on this series is, let's go back to the start, right? I want you to go back to when you were a teenager, when you were in high school, or whenever you first realized, okay, I'd like to do this as a career. What was that? And then just take me through that process, and then sort of how you start, where you went from there. Because I can actually see you've had a very interesting education. I was going to say you didn't start in IT, but I'll let you talk about it. Let's start there.
Well, look, let's be honest. I won't take you back all the way, but I'll give you a really short summary to start with. My parents tell this really fond story of me going to the museum up in Queensland in Australia, and arguing with one of the sort of folks that were there that were at one of the dinosaur exhibits, and talking about this brontosaurus didn't exist. And I remember going back to preschool and getting on the phone with one of the sort of museum curators and arguing with them until they said, why don't you just come and visit us? And so I started, this dream as a 5-year-old of becoming an archaeologist, becoming a paleontologist. A lot's happened since then. Left that dream behind, and in high school decided I wanted to get into forensic science and forensic chemistry. I really, and I'm sure we'll hear this coming out as I talk, but I love solving problems. And I've always loved solving problems with technology. And so, in the mid to late 90s, forensic science was really starting to make its way, sort of the precursor to all the CSI and everything.
I was about to say it's very CSI, right?
Yeah. So made this decision. I wanted to solve problems with science. And so sort of pursued that for a while. The most interesting forensic problems were in the police force. And so when I decided that in the middle of high school, it was, you go and be a police officer for a year, and then you'd be able to be transferred to the science wing. You'd be able to, do this thing that I was really passionate about. Turns out, you fast forward 5 or 6 years past there, graduate university, do all those sort of things. CSI catches on, and suddenly it's a lot harder to get a job in forensic science and forensic chemistry.
There you go.
Went and became a pharmaceutical chemist for a little bit. And that was really interesting. And I remember the day one of my buddies came to me. I was, I just been working some long hours on this new drug that we were trying to release, that we were testing and sort of providing methods for and things like that, this new pharmaceutical drug. And had some major setbacks. And I was young, early 20s. And he was like, look, it doesn't need to be that hard. Come, in technology, we have a great time. We go out for beers every afternoon, these sorts of things, like really, much different to my life in a white coat and, pouring beakers every day. And so the lure of solving computer problems was really interesting to me. And I still remember the interview. My future boss said to me, he's like, wait, you do what right now? You're a chemist? I was like, yeah. He's like, why on earth would we hire you? And I managed to convince him, I guess. And so I'll say the same thing to you and your viewers. It's all about solving problems. Solving problems is what drives me. And even today, solving hard problems with good people, that's all I want to do. And so, finding role after role where I could find a hard problem that needed to be solved and finding really great people to do it with. That has been my constant driver. So
Okay.
that's got me to here.
No, that's cool. That's cool. That's actually one of the things I do ask people about. What's the one of the I call it my philosophy, but we'll get into that near the end because I want to hear a bit more about sort of how you sort of drove through that. But it does sound like that's a key driver in the way you work on your career. So, yeah. So it sounds like the role itself, because initially, from the looks of it, you obviously had a role in forensic science, and then you did a diploma in IT. I had that up just a second ago. I can't remember which university that was with. And then you obviously, and was that at Minicom, senior systems engineer role? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. And so I stepped into a role there and sort of, help desk support. And I mean, have you ever worked in a help desk, George? I know you've had a bunch to do with them, but
yeah, well, I've had an interesting career. That's probably a podcast in itself. Yeah, so I've worked. I guess technically, my first role, it was a bit of all levels of support, and I've that was a smaller group, but yes, I've had that
I mean,
experience.
wild times on a help desk. If you want to solve the most varied problems in the world, I remember, we had a call one day from a guy just before Christmas asking, what he was supposed to do with the bucket over the Christmas break on this IT help desk, and I was like, what are you talking about, a bucket? He said, well, the air conditioning, it fills up the bucket, and every morning we empty it. But we're going to be away for more than 3 days, and so we wouldn't need to know what to do with the bucket because it'll overflow. It's like, look, do you have any tubing? Or, these sort of like being able to solve these problems is really interesting. But yeah, at Mincom, worked on a help desk and on-site support and executive support. Really, it was that was where I made my sort of mark in technology. I think while I was there, really made a decision. A help desk, you're very broad. You pick up the phone, you don't know whether it's someone needing to know what to do with a bucket, or it's someone that has an email problem or whatever it might be. You could get anything. I made the sort of decision that this technology around identity and authorization, things like that, was something really, really curious to me, and so sort of spurred on my next few job hops, to be honest. And so at Mincom, it was really about building my skills, getting the right certifications, getting the right networking connections, and things like that to build on top of.
Cool. All right. So it sounded like the sciences and forensics really helped build that problem solving itch that you had, which was driving that. And then when you go into help desk, which I totally understand, you had that broad view of all the different types of problems that you can see. And my goodness, there are a lot of different problems from every single human. It's amazing the calls you get at that first level of whatever it might be. The fax machine needs some paper, okay?
Yeah.
Some telephony problem or whatever it might be. It's a bit bizarre.
Yeah.
So then I guess that if we look at your career at that level, let's go. Let me bring up your experiences. You then moved into what I would say a specialist role, or your Active Directory. So that was probably your first foray into identity. Tell me so we've identified some of the skills that you've picked up in some of the other areas. What was it specifically? And we'll use the word identity because it's rather than specifically a Microsoft identity product here. What was it about identity specifically and then was that actually the role that you got at, was it, let me get it right, Ausenco? Was it Ausenco? Ausenco? Was that, or was it just an opportunity that came up when you were looking for roles after you left Minicom?
Ausenco is a good example of, as taking Mincom for a moment, the CIO of Mincom and I, towards the end, were working really closely together on a range of problems. And so, one of the key ones there was modernizing identity. And identity is interesting to me because at the most broad and the most nebulous sense, we all have an identity. We all care about that. We want it to be safe and protected. I won't get into the whole identity security pitch, but identity is who we are. And so without getting too philosophical, the manifestation of that in technology is really interesting to me. It's like, well, how do I represent in all of the systems that I use and all of the things I need to sort of do day to day, week to week. And so I was really curious and really wanted to explore how, the borderline between sort of physical world and sort of, the digital world there in terms of identity. And we'll get to other experiences there. I've done that in sort of maps and other places as well, where I find that intersection really interesting. But, really cut my teeth on identity there with the CIO of that company. And when he left, he said, Mark, we've got a similar set of challenges at Ausenco. Like, we'd love you to come over and help us support that as we go on a project. And so really there, as you think about building your career and building your skills and experience, cutting your teeth in a trusted place that and building on top of those skills and making the right connections and building the right network and demonstrating and showcasing the skills to the right people. Because the people you work with today may or may not be the people you work with tomorrow. Everyone goes places and making yourself known as someone with the right set of skills, the right set of abilities, the right attitude. That's all really important. And so that was, made the move to Ausenco really easy. I knew the CIO and he knew sort of what skills I had and what I could do.
Yeah. So it was a good combination of the right technology that you were looking for, definitely some problem solving there. And everyone will always say this, and it's a good point to bring up. It's who you know, not what you know. Sometimes it is true. It is true, especially Absolutely. when there's a lot of competition for roles. If somebody knows they can trust you, they know that what the work that you bring, that's important. It's almost like the brand that you have as a person, right?
Certainly, yeah.
That's a really cool example. And then essentially you've really sort of gone down that path moving forward. So you then moved to AGL. For those who are not Australian, AGL is a energy provider here in Australia as an Active Directory specialist. And you did that for around 7 months. It looks like it was just a contract, that role. And then the wonderful, amazing moment of your life when you got to meet amazing humans like myself. When you joined Turning Point, as I like to say to people. And I'd love to hear about how this happened. Well, you got a role as a premier field engineer at Microsoft. So tell me about how that opportunity came up, because I know a lot of people who potentially would be listening to this, one of the main reasons is that they might want to get to some of the larger organizations such as Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apple, Oracle, HP, IBM, all that sort of stuff. So how did your opportunity come up, and do you feel like, or what do you think that you did leading up to that helped when you got that opportunity?
Absolutely. I'll speak from my experiences here. I've had these almost all of the opportunities I've had in recent times because I've chosen to specialize and chosen a very specific set of things that I want to focus on. And so that word focus I use a lot, both at Signal today when I'm talking to my team and sort of the people that I work with, but just generally in my career. Focus is a finite resource and something that I'm really cognizant of at all times. And so, what am I spending my time focusing on? And so at AGL, it was really a focus on security and specifically identity security. And so through their modernization projects and things like that, I was working closely with the Microsoft account team and sort of, working with that team in terms of what our initiatives were, in terms of what we needed to do and wanted to do. And so again, building those connections with folks, both that I was working with and that I was working alongside at the likes of Microsoft and other partners, was really, really important there. And so I think it was our technical account manager came to me. He's like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, we've got another, couple of months of this project kicking along. He's like, well, we have an opportunity at Microsoft. We're looking for someone with your skills. And I found it really interesting. I went and talked to the team. Folks that you and I know, George, and really sold me on the opportunity. Again, Microsoft is solving some of the hardest problems for customers, and these people that I was meeting with were awesome. I'm not sure whether you interviewed me or not, but the people that of your caliber are awesome people. And so, while AGL was interesting and certainly a good challenge, solving problems at the scale of something like Microsoft is just a dream come true in a lot of regards. And so being able to move over, solve those hard problems, the reference came from a sort of a connection that I had by networking while I was at AGL. But certainly Microsoft was looking for someone with the right focus, the right set of skills, the right specialist, to be honest.
So a lot of the experience you'd had essentially put you in the best possible position when that opportunity came up, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that being very intentional about what I was going to focus on, and I think it said a lot. Like, if you have to be intentional, if you're focusing on one or two or three very specific things, you're not focusing on 100 or 1,000 other things. And so being intentional about that's really important.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I probably had a fairly, it's not exactly the same, but fairly similar experience. I obviously specialized in, for those who don't know about my career, in configuration manager or SCCM or SMS or whatever name you know it by. So client management, and then also delved a little bit into operations manager, and then that specific set of skills when I applied for the role helped me get the role, helped me have the skill set, so I was ready for it at that point. But and one thing I never thought about before was what you just said, was that connection, or the who you know, not what you know, because the technical account manager or account managers at Microsoft, I knew them and I knew them well because I worked with them because I was a specialist in that area, and also one of a PFE, Imtiaz Khan. Shout out to you, mate. If you listen to this, he probably won't. I don't think he watches YouTube. We spent like a week together, and I remember him telling me he was spewing. For those who don't understand Australianisms, that means he regretted not putting me forward because he missed out on, I think you get a bonus if you. Yeah. And I said to him, "Why didn't you put me forward?" And he said, "You're a subject matter expert. I didn't think you wanted to do that." Oh, I wish I had. I'm like, well, if I could have, I bought him lunch, so that made up for it. But I find that that's quite interesting. It sounds very similar. Our path to Microsoft is very similar. I had to apply for it because Imtiaz, you didn't put me forward, mate. Very disappointing.
Let us do it.
I got to let it go. That's cool. That's really cool. Now, one of the things, if people look at your resume or LinkedIn profile, they'll recognize this. You moved to the United States a couple of years into the role. Tell me what, and I always everyone's always got a different story. What was the desire to do that from your perspective? And then what do you think? Was it a conscious career choice, or is it I want an adventure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I think a little of everything. But I mean, let me tell you how it happened. So I'd gotten more and more specialized, or I guess maybe not. I was approaching new technologies in Australia. I wouldn't say I was bored, but certainly doing Active Directory risk assessments every week wasn't as exciting as it originally was. And so we're sort of branching out. This Azure and Entra product offering was just sort of blooming. So, can I do more there? As customers adopt this, can I help guide them and things like that? So really trying to push myself to do new and interesting things. I then found myself acquiring some pretty specialized skills. I was going so deep in this relatively new product that there were few people that had the same set of skills. And so I remember getting a call early one morning from someone, and they were in Atlanta, and they said, "Hey, look, seen you in the intranet. We've got this role in Atlanta. We need a specialized identity person for this big customer, and we think you'd be perfect." I was like, "Look, not keen to get to Atlanta, but thank you so much." And so there must have, at this point, I was training people. I was doing all sorts of stuff. I was trying to be as active as I could in the community, and so I guess I had some infamy or something to that extent. And I remember, a few weeks later, getting a call from Seattle from someone in Redmond that was sort of similar conversation. I said, "Look, I'm sorry. I've been to Seattle in the winter. I'm pretty happy where I am. Thanks so much." And so, getting approached, and so it's kind of, that was the trigger to start me thinking. It's like, well, I'm certainly not stagnant, but I'm looking for new opportunities, new challenges, things to push me. This is interesting. Okay. Maybe not moving to Seattle interesting, but I remember I was in the Philippines doing some training, and finally I got this call. I was walking home from a dinner back to the hotel, and it's this guy, this really Northern Californian guy, Brian, if you're watching, and he was like, "Marc Jordan, I need you in my team." And I was like, "Who is this, and what do you want?" And so introduced himself. He said, you know what, we've got all these massive customers, Silicon Valley ones you'd probably expect, and they have these problems, and I think you can help us out. And I was like, look, give me a minute to think about that. So he called me back the next week when I was back home, and I said, look, I'm in. Let's do it. And so started that process. And so, George, to answer your question, part just let's have an adventure. Let's go and push this. But part, like, I'm always looking for ways that I can sort of broaden my horizons and scratch that itch of like, well, what is this thing? Like, I want to understand. I want to lean into this thing and understand it. So I've always got this sort of latent curiosity.
Oh, well, that's cool. It's almost like you're headhunted internally, which is quite funny.
I guess so.
Yeah. And I think that the thing I always find that's cool about that was we always talk about this, the connections that you make with people. For those watching, so Mark ended up working for somebody I currently work with, which is Erin Jacobson. Erin, hello. I'm going to point this. If she'll watch this, I'm going to tell her about this call, this podcast, vlogcast, whatever we call it these days. So there you go. So it was more the adventure and a lot of those aspects that you're thinking about in your career. You know, what's the challenge? What's going to keep you going? But then the adventure was just sort of a side bonus. It wasn't really the driver for you.
Yeah, I mean, I love San Francisco. I lived there for, I've only been back in Australia now for about 6 months, lived there for 11 years. And, massively grateful to the team, for Brian in particular, for sort of getting me over there and supporting me. And, moving countries is no big deal. Is a big deal, but it's, having that connection, having that support, that was just amazingly valuable to my career, but also just to my life in general. I mean, living in San Francisco for 11 years is a dream come true. So it was really amazing.
Cool. I'll ask you a little bit later on about what you would advise to people who are moving country to country. Is there anything that was, an area that you'd avoid doing when moving country, and what you? Let's just ask that now. I'm going to forget. So what are some of the things that you would say to somebody who's moving country, whether it's intentional or not, in the role that they're doing? Are there things that you would avoid doing if you ever did that? If you were saying to yourself back then, hey, Mark, don't do this or try to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sounding a bit like a broken record, but when you're moving country, like, put yourself out there, get out, whether it's, you're in the office, attend work happy hours, or it's, like-minded people attending events after work, or whatever the case is. Like, do that. When you move, you've got to build that base and that foundation, and that network will help you succeed. And so absolutely do that. I think in terms of not doing, I think it's like, people underestimate how much they can get done in a year. And so be kind to yourself. Like, it's easy to get there and get frustrated that it's hard to get a credit card, or it's hard, like, don't beat yourself up is what I'm getting at here. Like, it takes time. Enjoy the rides. Like moving country, whether it's just you or you bring in, a partner and 6 kids and 3 dogs, like, it's going to take time. It's going to be challenging. Like, be kind to yourself. That I think, I'm an impatient person, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, I want things to move faster. I want to push things, and certainly wasn't helpful necessarily in getting where I was going early on, because some stuff just takes time, and you have to sort of appreciate the ride and not beat yourself up over it.
Got it. So let's move on to the next part of your career. And I actually remember this. I remember you came down to Melbourne because I think you had to get your passport renewed, and it was something to do with your visa. And I remember the place. We caught up with a bunch of trainers, not trainers, we were PFEs back then. I remember you saying, George, I'm leaving Microsoft. And I was like, what? To me, that was like this foreign thing. Today I get it. People sort of move roles a bit more, but especially in Melbourne, in Australia, it was like so rare for people to get a role at a larger company. And I remember you explaining to me, and I'll get you to explain to the listeners, it's not that big a deal in where you were from, San Francisco, and then it sort of made sense. But take me through what that was. It similar where you were being headhunted, where people were chasing you, an opportunity came up, and then you said, you know what, it's a new challenge. It's a similar process. And you, just to be clear to everyone, you moved initially to Okta. I remember that as a senior product manager, but take me through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love Microsoft. Even today, I think it is one of the best companies in the world. I mean, it's been a while since I've been at Microsoft, but in my current role, I work with the team there a lot. I just love Microsoft. I love working with them. And so you're right. It's a big deal to leave a company like Microsoft. The way it sort of happened, you're spot on. Like getting headhunted for a set of scarce skills is how I've kind of made my way. But the sort of the way it happened was, I was really enjoying. If you're a field engineer in San Francisco, you are working with really interesting companies. You name the big company, and I've sat in their offices and eaten their lunch and done all this sort of and solved really hard problems. And just a really great job. But I sort of was finding myself after a few years in San Francisco of all roads kind of leading to Redmond. There was a really great and really interesting security role that was opening up in Redmond. I've been working a lot with one of the internal teams that was doing really interesting security stuff. And it was all pointing to there. And Sarah, my partner, I said to her, look, I think we're moving to Seattle. And so we had a lot of conversations, and I think we both landed on, we love San Francisco. This is our home. We're not ready to move to Redmond and to Seattle. And so, that same week I had someone reach out to me from Okta, and, my whole time in the US, my whole 11 years, I was on a visa. Every 2 years, it'd go and get it renewed, and you go through that process. And so in my head, and as stupid as this may sound now, I was only ever there for 2 years at a time. And so if you're in San Francisco, in the heart of Silicon Valley, in this booming industry, you want to try and make as much benefit as you possibly can. And so, okay, if we're going to stay in San Francisco, is there an opportunity that I can have here that sort of will benefit me for the long term? Some experience that I can't get anywhere else. Okta was like 350, 400 people at that time, maybe slightly less. And so not a small company, but this place where I could find out how a Silicon Valley startup operated, like where they were still finding the right fit and growing their customer base and things like that. And so for me, it was getting headhunted for specialized skills, but then getting this new experience, bringing skills to a team, but then just getting this whole new set of experiences and skills that I'd never had before that a place like Okta was uniquely positioned to give me.
Okay. Yeah. That is cool. So it's essentially yet another, it goes back down to those principles you've got, the philosophy, as I call it. It's always a challenge. What's a new challenge for you? What's going to be something you can actually problem solve, essentially?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
right.
That's cool. And then another big one, your old post Okta was with Google, another big company that a lot of people work for. And it's funny, I do know a lot of people especially in the US, do bounce between some of the big companies. But again, similar question, was that the same sort of thing where you headhunted to Google and then, hey, another opportunity, it's the right point in my career? Was that similar there as well?
Yeah, I mean, Okta is a great company, but I remember we'd just been through the IPO process, and the IPO process was extremely exciting. Really amazing to see the company change over the course of sort of a scrappy startup to this public company. And I remember running into one of my colleagues in the hallway, a few months after we'd IPO'd, and we were bringing in a bunch of new people. And he said to me, it's funny that the people we work with today aren't the people we joined with. And that was I'd never really thought about it before. Things had changed. Process was different, and the way you got stuff done was different. And the way you navigated sort of politics was different. Not bad, just different. And it got me thinking. He's very right. And so I started to think about, well, what do I like this style of working? Do I, is this what's getting me out of bed? And I was like, well, what else is out there? And it just so happened that Google was getting big into identity. It literally just made a very large acquisition for a company that competed with Okta. And they were looking to hire identity professionals to really bolster that team and take something out to market. And so I remember a recruiter at Google reached out to me, and then at the same time, a director of product management reached out, and I sort of asked both of them, like, do you two know each other? Like, no, but we should connect internally. So just funny that they were all sort of searching for the same role. Talked to them. still talk to that recruiter, just an amazing person. She's phenomenal, and still talk to that manager today because they're both just incredible people, and really helped guide me through the process to get into Google. And I think this is at least at that point was sort of interesting that team was hiring for specialized skills, for specialized knowledge, for someone that brought interesting and new things to the table that Google didn't they didn't have people that were deploying Okta or ADFS or Azure to large enterprises. They were very focused on internal identity and things like that. So I got into Google that way and really split my time. Google is a fantastic company. I was working there on iOS device management for my first 2 months, and that same director came to me and he's like, how's Google? Like, are you enjoying it? I was like, this is the best job I've had, but this device management thing, that's interesting. Like, is that what I should be doing? He was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, you think about Google's account system. It's one of the best in the world. I don't worry my Gmail account's going to get hacked. Why don't we sell that to customers? Lights went off, and suddenly I was meeting with VPs and putting together pricing proposals and total market value and things, and managed to spin up a team to go and really embark on that journey. And so we did that and pushed it out there, which was really great.
No, that sounds pretty like a pretty cool experience. It doesn't sound like something that would normally happen in a company the size of Google, but that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So what then led you eventually, once you'd gotten through your time at Google, and the last couple of roles you've had, you were at Stealth for about 6 months, and I guess potentially another startup, and then to Signal AI. What led you to there, and then eventually what led you and your partner to come back to Australia, which in my super unbiased opinion is the greatest country in the world. Sorry, everybody, we just are. Australia is an amazing place to live. But yes,
absolutely. You're spot on. I had the second part of my Google. I promised to get to your point, but this all come together. The second part of my Google career was Google Maps. I was the lead for the user-generated content platform team.
So we can thank you for Google Maps. That's
you can thank me for reviews on Google Maps and things like that, but cool. Partly. But I remember I was accepting that role in February of 2020. And so it didn't occur to me when I was accepting that role that in March 2020, if I'm getting my dates correct, that the whole world was going to shut down for COVID.
Yes.
Now, leading up the Maps platform, the Maps user-generated content platform team, when there's no user-generated content coming in because there's no one going out, is a really interesting experience. And so the role was all about, well, for the content that we are getting, how do we make it available to people in the fastest possible way? How do we extract new good content and things like that? And so I worked with the Maps team through COVID. And a really great experience, really me pushing myself to say, like, well, am I just an enterprise identity PM, or can I do more than that? Really reaffirming that I can actually, exist outside of my comfort zone. But during COVID, I was like, okay, I just want to be back in Australia. I'm really just ready to go home. And so, I started those conversations with my partner, and we sort of started to, and I was like, I said, 2022, I was like, look, I think I'm ready to go home. And we had this constant back and forth, like, no, just a couple more years. And so the same deal, just a couple more years. And so in 2022, it was just a couple more years. And I said, well, and if it's going to be, just a couple more years at least, like, why don't I go and join the smallest startups I possibly can? Because like San Francisco is the only place in the world you can go join a venture funded, that's not true anymore, but it's a great place to go and join a tiny venture funded startup and go and try and change the world. And so I joined a little stealth startup and consulted for 6 months and learned a lot about who I was and the sort of team that I wanted to join. And that wasn't quite the right fit for me. So at the end of the 6 months, I sort of looped back to the team at Signal, who were just starting out. Got our CEO was my boss at Google for a period of time, and and sort of we were just having conversation. We were having beers in Palo Alto, and he's like, how about it? And I was like, I'm in, buddy. I'm all in. Joined Signal as employee number 4, and the rest is history. So again, just someone who knew my skills, was a great connection. But importantly, and I talk a lot about this to people, is just a great culture fit.
Super important.
Our founders, we know and trust each other. We can have hard conversations, and just really, really great team. And so looking for that was the top of my priority list.
It really does sound like a lot of your values have driven your entire career, even to today. The essentially homesickness would be the word I would probably use if I'm listening to you, like really drove you back to Australia. And please don't get offended by me saying Australia is the greatest country in the world. Everyone's going to say that about their own country, obviously.
Yeah. And you're right, you're right.
Well, yeah, it's true. Australia is a wonderful place to live. If you haven't visited, visit it. I'm not sponsored by Tourism Australia, but anything. So you've almost answered the question that I ask everybody, which is what your philosophy. My philosophy has always been I love helping people, so education is a big part of what I've always done. I always need to be passionate about what I do. I don't have to do it 24 hours a day, so I need to, if I work in a technology, it has to, drive some sort of desire in what I'm doing, and there has to be purpose. They're the sort of the 3 main things. I don't want to do work that has no purpose behind it, but it does sound like you've got those. But I'll ask you to just give me the values that you think after our conversation now that you've driven, and you've sort of said a few of them already.
Yeah. And I'll keep the ones I've said brief, but I might give you 1 or 2 more. Hard problems, number 1. Like, I problem solving is my, I don't want to say superpower, but it's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. Give me a problem and I'll work all day and all night on it until it's solved. Like I don't know what it is, but I'll just sit there and do it. So
might need to get you to go to the SGNL football club and help solve the. For those who don't follow AFL football, just anyone who's an SGNL supporter will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
look it up.
We'll
bring you over there. It's Essendon and Carlton supporters are probably just Essendon, Carlton, St Kilda supporters. No, we can't. All right, moving on.
The Hawthorn game was not bad. Yes. We were there the other night, but
moving on from AFL football. Sorry, I didn't mean to drop.
So hard problems. I want to be solving the hardest problems. I find I'm a good problem solver. I like putting my headphones on and just like focusing, but I love solving hard problems with good people. Like having someone sit around the table with me, like, wait a second, did you see this? Or I'm thinking about this. Oh my gosh, like sign me up all day. People that'll sit with me and indulge us like getting deep into a problem. And so then those are the things that get me out of bed. I think the last thing is, and it comes from that second piece there, is I'm the first to admit that I have very little shame when it comes to asking questions or sort of trying to dig in and try and but why? Like trying to understand. And so I look for people that will put up with that, to be honest. Like that's, I want people that can have hard conversations, can dig deep, can sort of have, not arguments necessarily, but like really poke at things. And then, after we're done, wrap it up and go have a beer. And I think that's, so that's my third thing is looking for people that are prepared to sort of rattle cages and take feedback and give feedback and push people and things like that. And so, I think that's captured in good people, but specifically that is, I have pretty thick skin, but I want people that are going to drive me forward because I'm really always looking for that next, as you sort of indicated and seen, always looking for people, always looking for the next challenge, the next thing that's going to keep me occupied and keep my brain going. And people that push me to do that are just, some of my favorite people in the world.
It's awesome, mate. It's good philosophy. So give me sorry, were there any more?
That's a good summary.
I think it's pretty obvious how you've driven your career. It's a good way to go. Because I always say to people, if people talk to me about their careers, I never say, if they say to me, I want to become a senior technical specialist, I say, well, why? Is the first question. Why?
Yeah.
Because
What does that mean?
it's a title.
Yeah.
Who cares? I want to become a manager. Why? But how's that going to improve your life? Like what is I when people say, because I love helping people and I want to be accountable. I had a really good answer from somebody I've interviewed who said he'd always mentored people, but he wanted to have the accountability behind that. And I thought that's actually a really good point. And he knew he was at the position in his career where that he'd be able to achieve that. So, yeah, that's why I always say, make sure you got your values aligned, and then your career will follow that path. All right, so let's go through a couple more questions that I ask everybody, which is give me what's been a highlight of your career, and also what's been a low light of your career.
Great question. I still joke. You'd know this well. As a field engineer, you sort of you often get dropped into like hot situations. You're like, everything's going wrong and you need to solve it. And I remember, I won't mention the customer, but I remember sitting at my desk in Microsoft in Melbourne. I was just sort of, I don't know what it's, timesheets, expenses, something like that, like catching up. And someone turns around, the coordinator turns around to me and she says, "Mark, you busy?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just doing,
always say no. Always say yes. Yes, I am busy. That's the answer.
She's like, I need you to go up the road. There's a customer that's having a problem. Someone needs to be up there. All right, like grab my bag, threw my laptop in, ran up. And so everything was down. There's all these people standing in this big office, just like standing around, like looking at each other. Like you'd walk in, the door opens and there's like 40, 50 people on this floor, just like standing up in their cubicles. And I was like, well, things are bad. Anyway, so I meet with the guy, we start to chat. And we're talking and we're figuring out, and so we're going through it. I was like, okay, you should like starting to give guidance, and we're like on his computer going. And so we're like troubleshooting. We're troubleshooting in real time. And I was like, okay, no, do this and this and this. And so I'm guiding him through the process, trying to teach him as we go. They'll joking, but the lights flicker and then like things come back on and everything starts working again. And so he's hanging around for like 15 or 20 minutes. Things are like coming back online and everything's looking good. Emails coming back in, everything's starting to work. And, he's like, it's working. And so I was like, I turned around to leave and I get this like round of applause in this office as I'm like, never in my life before or since have I met. I was like, that feels kind of good. That's a stupid. I mean, it's not stupid, but that's a funny highlight. But it's that sort of thing. It's like how the things that I've tried to do in my career to make people either directly it's a very obvious example or how can I make an impact to people? How can I make people's life better? Whatever by whatever metric that we're measuring it by on that day. And so they're the sort of things that are highlights for me.
Yeah, that's cool.
In terms of a low light, I haven't had that many lowlights. I've had a good number of things I look back on and say I learned something important there. I learned that I should, trust my gut. I shouldn't compromise my values. I should, whatever the case is. And I think, where I've had low times potentially is where I've sort of not listened to my head or not stuck by my values. I've done things that felt unnatural or felt weird. And so I think when I think about a low light, it's those sort of things. It's, not dotting the I or crossing the T on a require, those sorts of things. And then looking back, and probably the bigger low light is like knowing that I compromised my values to sort of do something and thinking, well, I should have done better. I could have done better. And so that's kind of what I think about.
That's a good way to think of it as well. Definitely. Anytime you have any low lights or if you make mistakes, etc., it's always a good learning moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I was something popped in my head when I asked you that question just then. I remember, I think it was one of the first weeks. I went into I got brought into a customer. Name won't be said. You worked there one time, and I went into a meeting. It's probably one of the worst meetings I've ever been in, even to my entire career. And there was someone in there who just went off at me and another person. You're Microsoft, because for those who haven't worked for companies, some of these, I guess, more prominent companies, if you work from Microsoft, whether it's Google, Apple, I do it. Suddenly, you know everything. Apparently, it doesn't matter. It's like
Google search is working. Microsoft Windows.
So it's just someone venting at for whatever reason, and they're venting, and I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
I remember walking out of that meeting, and I remember the first proper gig I had. Probably to this day, the worst gig I've ever had in my entire week. It was a rap. It was like for anyone watching who used to be PFA, you know what I mean. And it was just this customer who was just a nightmare. And no matter what we did, and the person I worked with was doing that thing, but I was actually shadowing somebody else. And at the end of the week, I think after the first day, I walked out. I've called my wife and I said, I think I've made a massive mistake. I shouldn't have joined Microsoft. This is terrible. And she politely said to me to suck it up, because that's it. That's what I love about my wife. She's very straightforward. But you look back on moments like that, and it's actually a good moment. It sort of it makes the tough moments easier to handle, and you think more clearly in those moments, similar to what you explained. So, all right, so let's go to the hard hitting question. One of the final questions I tend to ask people is that, think back to someone in the similar shoes to you, right? Whether it's I've just studied something that has nothing to do with what I want to do, or I want to get into IT. And I also point out to my kids, you don't have to have a normal path to a career, but what advice would you give yourself as a young kid, or when you realized, okay, this is not working out for me, for them to think about when they move forwards? Because I do get a lot of people saying to me things like, oh, do I have to get 7,030 certifications and then I'll get a awesome job? And it's like, no. But what would you say to somebody who's starting their career off or wants to switch careers, for example? Similar to what you did.
I mean, this is going to sound a little contrived, but like, what do you love doing? And let me put this, I won't talk baselessly, I'll put it in my terms. Like I've said a few times now, I love solving problems. And so, I picked a career that I could solve problems. Like maybe the job itself wasn't right, but the solving problems part was amazing. And so, whether you're just starting out, I think the question is like, well, what do I love doing? Is there some role? It may not be completely right, but like, does it have some component of the thing that I love doing? Like, go do that, go start that, and then figure out the things that you love about that, and figure out the things that you just don't love, and then look for the next thing. For someone then sort of bridging that into, hey, I've started in chemistry and that's not quite like, I love X, Y, and Z, but I hate A, B, and C. Well, get really good at X, Y, and Z, or go get really good at X, pick something, and then take X and demonstrate it to, use that to bridge into something else that also has X, but has, S, T, and U as well, or whatever the case may be. And so be able to take skills, get really good at those skills, particularly skills that you like doing, and then bring those skills to a new role, a new discipline, a new art form, whatever it might be. And so I think and be able to talk about that, be able to showcase that. Like if you're an expert drummer, like go show that off to people that care, that people are like-minded, that you can do that. You might not be a drummer for the Chili Peppers or something, but maybe you're a drum team. Like you know what I mean. Like be able to take that and demonstrate it. So I think there's always that. Get really good at something, and then be able to demonstrate it and use that to adapt to different scenarios.
Yeah, good example.
Sorry if the drum analogy is probably not quite right, but
it's a good one. We got the drums in the background. Not that I'm quite a Chili Peppers drummer yet.
Yeah, you're
Chad, if you're out there, love to meet you. Just mentioned my favourite band in the entire world, but anyway. All right, cool. All right, well, mate, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking out the time.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for watching this episode of Simpa Says. If you would like to see more videos, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Or follow if you are listening on a podcast platform to support the channel and join our community.